Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this ATG webinar about Everyday Dynamo Part 2. I did a Part 1 a couple months ago, showcased a couple workflows, bringing you today a Part 2 for Everyday Dynamo stuff that you can take from workflows or take the workflow themselves and incorporate it into almost your everyday routine. My name is Patrick Podine. I am an AEC technical specialist here in the Phoenix office for ATG. So let's get started. First of all, kind of who am I? I'm a certified professional in Revit architecture and Revit structure. I would consider myself a lightly seasoned Dynamo user. I'm starting to learn Python, I'm starting to learn C# and starting to explore more of the computational platform and the computational workspace, as well as machine learning and AI. I do a bit of training here and there for Dynamo, as well as building workflows specifically for clients. I am a seasoned amateur golfer, I would like to say. I do play, starting to play consistently now. Living here in Arizona, it's pretty easy to go play golf. And then I'm also a huge foodie. If you're on Twitter, there's my handle, the notorious BIM. Also too, if you could please save your questions till the end of the presentation. You can type them in either the chat window or in the Q&A, and I will get to those at the end. I already see one in there, what's with the 80s synth rock playing. It's more or less just so when people join that there's not dead air, something to, engage with, something to keep you entertained while we wait for the presentation to start, if you happen to jump in early. So I am working on a Striker M workstation right now. I'm working on the laptop version of the BIMbox Striker. This thing has saved me enormous amount of time working and waiting for projects to open, projects to upgrade, working on large files, that sort of thing, crunking out large number of data within Dynamo. At times, your computer starts to take up processing power, and so I am working off of a BIMbox Striker for this presentation. All right, so kind of, there's the course description there. We're going to go explore some workflows, learn some stuff, how I build it, my logic behind building it. Hopefully the takeaway from here is that you can, start to adapt these workflows to yours in your office, or you can take the workflows that we've built here today and use them in your office. These workflows will be given out and will be available for you to download, and this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out, so we can see some of the learning objectives there. We're going to look at data types and look at how to set non-text and number parameters. If you're familiar with Dynamo, you know that you probably have worked with setting either the comments parameter or a offset parameter, something like that, that requires a text value or a number. Today we're going to be looking at using Revit Elements to set some values there, identify some of the logic behind the workflows and the nodes, so that way you can apply them to your own, and then let's develop a stronger understanding of node usage and data flow. So real quickly, let's kind of cover some of the data types and parameters. We have strings. This is programming lingo for text. Some Revit parameter examples of strings would be the comments, the mark, the room name, number, view name, sheet name. Those are going to be examples that would require a string, as well as if you were to get those values, they would give you a string as a data type. The next one are numbers, kind of self-explanatory on what a number is. Revit parameter examples, any element offset. So you place a component on your screen or on your Revit platform, and it's going to deliver you a number, whether it's in the form of a regular number or a floating number with decimal points in there. Level elevation, When you grab that, it's going to give you an actual number, not specifically when you grab the level itself, but when you grab the actual offset of a level or the actual value for that level. Area and volume are also some parameters that will give you a number value. Next are Booleans, and those are simply just true or false values within the Revit platform or within the Revit space. It's a yes/no type of parameter. So when you go into create a project parameter using either a shared parameter or a project parameter, and you click on that yes/no, basically the check on, check off box, it's going to give you a Boolean, or you can use a Boolean to set that parameter. And so some examples of that would be the crop region, check on, check off. Included in sheet index, that's another one that's going to require a Boolean, and then room bounding for specific elements. Now, Revit Elements, some examples of these are objects that are coming straight from Revit that we can utilize in Dynamo. So like the element level, so I was mentioning earlier with the level, when we go and grab the actual level, hosting level of an element, it's going to give us the level, the scope box, whenever we're looking to change the view type, we're actually going to be needing a view type in the form of a Revit element, and then any form of creating or demolishing or anything phase-wise will require a Revit element, specifically the phase. So moving on to the next slide, kind of what's on the menu for today. So the first workflow, we're going to look at creating area views from scope boxes. Specifically, we'll look at how to create dependent views, though it's a simple, quick toggle change if you want to create just regular copied views rather than dependent views. We'll then look at how we can utilize the views that we've created and place those onto sheets. And then as a bonus, if there's time remaining, we'll cover a workflow that I went over in my UI and Dynamo webinar, and I will go step by step on how to create that interior elevation workflow. All right, let's get into it. It's time for live examples. All right, so we'll jump into Revit right away. I'm in the actual sample file itself. I've deleted a couple things. I've actually tested on this one, so let's undo all of that. And so basically just have our basic floor plans here. So 0-1 entry level to floor, so on up to roof. I've actually moved the furniture layout to have its own view type, and then working with some of the ceiling plans. Also in this file, I've created a couple scope boxes in here, naming them Area A, Area B, Area C, and Area D. And the reason I name them as such is because this is the information that I'm going to pull out of these scope boxes in order to name my views correctly. So it would read 0-1 entry level space dash space, Area A, B, C, so on and so forth. So if you want to give your scope boxes different names, just be aware that this workflow, how we're going to build it, is it's going to take that information and apply it to the view name that we're going to be creating. All right, let's go ahead and open up Dynamo. So I am using a custom view extension called Dyna Standard, where I'm able to define a template. I'm sure you've seen plenty of ways out there, if you're familiar with Dynamo, on how to create a template. I'm simply just using the Dyna Standard view extension here to create my template. It's going to always open up with some of my groupings as well as my graph information in here. A really cool view extension. Go ahead and check it out. All right, so our goal here is to, one, duplicate views and name them appropriately. And then the second goal here is that we wish to set the scope box to those views. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at our last node that we wish to utilize, which is going to create our views. This is out of the Archilab package. It's called views.duplicate. So I'll look for view.duplicate. Click. And also, if you see that I have a blue node here, that's coming straight from the Monocle package using that custom node differentiator. What it does is it's just going to identify custom nodes, nodes from custom packages that are in your workspace and highlight them for you. So it's easy to identify if you haven't already gone through the package usage doge. Again, if you don't have Monocle, highly recommend installing this, downloading it, because how I would think John would say it is it makes your graphs suck less and it makes it easy for people to understand. Or actually, this is not the right node. We're looking for view.duplicate. View.duplicate. So it looks like we've got some changes in here. So we'll duplicate as a dependent. And so the node that I had previously, it had the input of a view, a name, and then the options. It looks like these have changed quite a bit, or I might not have the most up-to-date package going in there. So we're looking for a view and we're looking for a name, and it's going to duplicate it as a dependent. So we need to first start building the view, and then we need to start building the name from that. So kind of how we'll start this workflow out is, again, we'll use a node from Archilab. Let's hope that it's in there. Views.getByType. So it is not in there. And actually what I'm going to do is just open up that workflow and we'll just walk through that. I need to update some stuff. So this is exactly what I'm looking for. So views.duplicate, this is what the node should look like. It's looking for a view, a name, and then a specified option. That option would be read through a separate node called duplicate options. Off of that, we're going to start grabbing our views. And so we're going to use a node called views.getByType. And so what this is looking for is a string value of the view types that you wish to get. And there's a drop-down node that he includes that will have the drop-down for all of those different view types in there. Specifically, I'm looking for floor plans and I'm looking for ceiling plans. So it looks like we have a question. I can answer this one right now. So Archilab is a free package. All of these packages are free. So if we go into the package tab, go to search for a package, give it a second to sync with the server. Sometimes this can take a while depending on your internet speed, and just look for Archilab. Archi space lab, and we can see it there, Archilab, and it does look like I have an older version of Archilab, so I need to get that updated. So go to archilab.net, search for that in the package manager, search, and download that one. To get it. All of these packages are free. All right, so views.getByType. Here I'm creating a code block comprised of a list of strings here. So floor plan and ceiling plan, they must be one word. This is going to grab specifically the floor plan types in our project and the ceiling plan types in our project. So even though this view is on its own sort of view type, it's still considered a floor plan, as you can see denoted here. So if you have structural plans, any other type of plans or like that, you'll need to make sure that it's specified as that. So if it was a structural plan, it would just be structural floor plan, I believe. So once we get our views by type, we're going to go ahead and flatten this list. And what I'm going to do is just freeze this node here, run it, and we can start to see what happens. Freezing the node, what it does is it just puts a stop on it. It's not going to execute as we run this graph. Whenever I'm creating anything in Dynamo, I always want to make sure that I'm in the manual mode. So let's go ahead and hit run here. So let's go ahead and look. We can see views.getByType. It's going to give us the floor plans and it's going to give us the ceiling plans in two separate lists. Moving forward in this workflow, it's all right if we flatten it. We're not going to change the order of how these views are listed in here. We're going to keep them in the same order because we're going to utilize these views in order to create our new views. So the next thing we want to start doing is start to build our naming convention, because we need to supply the name for the actual views that's going to be duplicated off of. And how we do that, again, is we're going to use the element.name node. So what this does is it just pulls out the name from the actual views themselves. This works for any other native Revit element. you pull from Revit itself. So it could be floor plan, could be a view template, could be an element, could be a wall, could be a door, kind of anything, and it's going to give you the name for it. Also too, from that, we're going to go and grab all of the scope boxes in our project because we want to use the naming off of them. So area A, area B, C, so on and so forth. We want to use that name. As we see here, element.name is just going to grab the name of the scope boxes for us. So area A, B, C, D. What I want to do here is just add A, B, C, D onto the end of the entry level, the floor here. And the way that I'm doing that is just using a string.insert node. So let me go ahead and expand this down. What I'm doing here is just simply adding on to the front of it that space dash space piece of text to the front of it. You must include the spaces. Dynamo doesn't know that you want to include the spaces, so be sure if you want spaces that you include those in there. After that, we throw it into the string.insert node. And the reason why I have this set to level 1 and not at just regular level 2 with regular lists at level is because it would not give me the result I want. So what it would do is actually, let's just show this off. If I hit run on this, we can kind of see that it just does it for the first set of items here. What I want it to do is actually read at level 1. So it's going to pretty much cut these into each individual sort of sublist. Because right now at level 2, it's just reading the outside and it's just applying it one-to-one. It doesn't necessarily know where to go from there. So I just set this to use at levels and set it to level 1. If I hit F5 again, we can see that it applies area A to all of these views, B to all of these views, and C to all of those views. Also with that, because I want to add it to the end, I'm using the string.length node. I don't want to try to create a list of numbers that would encapsulate the length of all of these texts, because what if I'm wrong in one of those cases? I want to make sure that all of that, that it adds it to the end on all of them, no matter what, no matter the length of the list. So we see here this one has 4, it's going to add it to the end. So this just ensures that it's going to add it to the end all of the time. So once we do that, we're going to throw it through a list transpose node. Let me move this note out of the way. And what I want to do here is just get all of my entry level A's together because that's how I want it to be duplicated off of going into this node. And so it's going to duplicate the view and then apply the name and then apply the actual option to it. And if I were to send this into here as such, then entry level A, floor 01, 02, 03, all of these views would be underneath the floor plan for the 01 entry level. That's not what I want. What I want is 01 entry level, and then I want 01 entry level area A, B, C, so on and so forth. And so that's why we transpose this list. The next thing we do here is we analyze it at level 3. So looking at the lacing here, so at level 3 would be looking at it from the outside here. If we were to do at level 1, it would analyze it from each one individual here, and then regular lacing would be at level 2. You can go ahead and play around with the lacing, kind of see what it gives you each and every single time to play around with it, but just know that when I was figuring this out, I set it to level 3 and I got the result that I wanted. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to right click, we're going to unfreeze, we're not going to run just yet. We're going to then look a little bit further in the graph, and so what it's doing here is we're just doing a flatten. We'll look at that once we run this workflow, and then it's going to set the actual scope boxes. So if we look at Revit, we see that there are no dependent views created from here. Now, if you wanted to, you can actually change this to just do as a duplicate. And if you don't want to have dependent views, if say you have a reason why you don't need dependent views, you can have this duplicate just as a duplicate or with detailing. So you have all 3 of those options at your disposal. So set that to as a dependent. I'll go ahead and hit F5. Give it a couple seconds to run. Now just do note with this node here, each time you run, it is going to redo that duplication for you. So if you're doing any sort of troubleshooting or testing out the first time and you create views you duplicate views and it doesn't give you the result that you want, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to undo what you just did in Dynamo, in Revit. So it undid that. And then what I need to do from here is actually clear these values out, because I couldn't just rerun this workflow with this node in here. It'll give me an error and tell me, hey, these elements were just here. They're not here anymore. What kind of happened, so to speak? So the one way that you can sort of clear this node is to remove one of the values inputs that would fulfill the node. So what I like to do is just click to grab the actual output from the views node, hit F5, it clears that value. Notice that no views were additionally created. Re-plug that back in, make whatever modifications or changes that I need to make in this workflow. Connect this back into here, hit F5 again, and it's going to rerun with those changed options. And then you can further analyze what just happened. Did what I wanted to make happen, did it happen? And then you can go through, verify, and validate that all of that information was just created. We can see here that all of these views were created as a dependent. If I click on one of these views here, I can scroll down and see that the scope box has been set. And so let's kind of look a little bit further in the Dynamo workflow to kind of see what just happened. So notice here the lacing it's all the way at level 4. I don't necessarily need it at level 4. Let's go ahead and flatten it a little bit. So I use a list flatten at level 2. So it's just going to remove this value here and this value here and take it to something a little bit nicer for me to work with, because I don't need it in this sort of indented list. From here, I'm tying this list flatten into this element.set parameter by name. I'm setting it at level 2, so it reads each one of these elements inside, because remember, it's area A, B, C, and D. I'm setting the parameter name of the scope box, and the value is the actual scope boxes themselves in the order of A, B, C, and D. Now, if this was in a different order, I would want to make sure that my views are specified in a different way whenever I'm plugging it into this element.set parameter by name node. So you can see here as I expand this, it's going to set all of those views. It's going to start with all the views at index 0. So it's going to set entry level A, and then B, and then C, and then D. So there's that workflow. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We're going to actually just reuse what we have here. Go ahead and minimize all of these. Close this out. Again, you will have access to this workflow. I'll be sure before I post this up there that I get the most updated version of Archilab. I apologize for that, but I will get the most updated version of Archilab in there and then get those nodes replaced. So that way you guys don't have any errors or issues running this workflow. So let's go ahead and close that out. So we have now our newly created duplicated views. And what we're going to do now is we're going to place those dependent views onto sheets. I have a start file here, which basically just has a dictionary ready to be created that I'm going to utilize a little bit later. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with kind of our first goal here, which is to just simply create sheets. And what we're going to do is utilize a node out of the rhythm package called sheet.create. Sheet.create. This again is another package that is free to download. All of these packages are free to download. Some of them do require you to go to a different spot rather than the package manager, though it will be outlined in the package manager as to where you can go to download those packages. Off the top of my head, I know that the Crumple package from Gavin Crump is something that needs to be downloaded externally. The Orchid package, and then I believe it is Lunchbox is another package that needs to be downloaded externally. All right, so this is going to be our power node. This is the node that's going to create all of our sheets for us. The only input it's looking for is a title block. So let's go ahead and look for it. So if I hover on this node here, I can see it's looking specifically for a family type, as you can see listed there at the bottom. Go ahead and expand Dynamo a little bit further. the title block to use. It's looking for a family type, so we can just simply look for family types. Click here. And let's try and just see what goes on. So this is the, these are the two title blocks that are in the sample file. For your specific project, go ahead and navigate to your specific family type. I believe there is a way to extract the actual title block by using just the name, as long as the name of the title block is consistent all the way throughout. So let's go ahead and tie this family type into the title block. Let's go ahead and run this once and kind of just see what happens. Let's go down to Sheets and look, it created us a brand new sheet. The one thing to note here is we're tying in one element, specifically the family type of one element into this title block sheet create, and it's only creating one sheet for us. Not exactly entirely useful for us. We want it to create a sheet for all of our dependent views. So we want it to create a sheet for all of these views here, all of these views here, all of these views here, kind of the same thing for all of our dependent views that we had just created. So not exactly the most useful thing for us to use. What we're gonna have to do is actually replicate and duplicate this family type element, the amount of times that we have views in our project. And so how we do that is we're going to use a node called list.ofRepeatedItems. We'll place this here and we'll duplicate our item, and then the amount is going to be the amount of times that we have views. So let's go ahead and start grabbing our views to then be able to fill this value here. So that way it's going to give us the correct amount of title blocks in order to create those sheets. So kind of scroll over to the very beginning. And again, this one is using an Archilab package. It looks like that's the only one that it's going to be using. So what I'm going to do here is open up the end result. Let's save this one real quick and just copy that one out. We're going to utilize this. I'm just going to copy this out. Let me make sure I get it all. Copy. And let's go back to the start. And let's paste that in there. So this was the node I was looking for originally, views.getByType. And it's looking for the floor plan, ceiling plan. Let's go ahead and hit F5 on here. At this point, we can pretty much set this to automatic. Let's just disconnect the family type from the title block just to make sure it's not going to create sheets. As you can see here, each additional run that I had run did create an additional sheet. So do keep in mind if you are using this and you accidentally set it to automatic, you could potentially run into an infinite loop, thus forcing you to close out of Dynamo and Revit. So let's disconnect those. Just make sure that those are disconnected. Great, they are. Let's go ahead and change this to automatic. And let's look at what we have here. It's going to grab all of our views for us in our project. So what we want to do is we want to actually get rid of the actual parent views in here, because I don't want to place those on sheets. I want to just place the area plans onto sheets. And so I don't want this view, this view, this view, or that view to be placed onto our into our project or onto sheets. So what I'm going to actually use is the value that's specified for the scope box. So all of these views have a scope box specified, right? This one does not. We have not specified that one. It's set to none, so I'm going to use that information in order to remove those views from my list of views that I want to place onto sheets. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just do an element get parameter by name. Get parameter value by name. Let's maximize Dynamo. And we're going to grab the scope box. Use code block, double left click to drag that on there. We can see here it's going to deliver us a list of elements, right? So these views up here have none in them. These ones also have none in them as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that information there, run it through a conditional conditional thing, we're going to use does not equal. So does not equal is the exclamation point and the equal sign, and this one just simply says X does not equal Y. So we're going to tie this into our Y, and we're going to evaluate if it says none. I want it to give me a false value because it does not equal that. And then this one will deliver us a true, or actually it's going to say none because it does equal it, but this is saying does not equal. You could run it as a does equal, which is just simply the double equal sign. Both will work. And what we're going to do is these are string values. How I know that is we can use an object.type node, tie this into here. We can see here that it's giving us a string. I can see Revit.elements.unknown element. Some of the elements in Revit are exposed, and it'll actually tell you what type of element is. But just as long as you know that it is a Revit.element, we'll let you know that we are working specifically with Revit elements. So I can go ahead and remove that and know that this is a string and create a string to compare against. So I'll double click to create a code block. Start with the quote, type in none. It is case sensitive. End quote. And if you click outside, it automatically appends the semicolon. So I'll tie this into my X. I'll tie this one also into my X, and we can kind of see the results there. So we can see here that these do equal none, so it's going to give us a false value. These do not equal none, so it's going to give us a true value, and kind of the vice versa of that. Both methods work, kind of whichever you want to utilize. Moving forward, go ahead and utilize that method. What I'm going to do from here is use a filter by list.filter by Boolean mask. And what it's going to do is it's going to apply the true false values to whatever elements we supply into the list and give them either the in, which is going to be all of the true values, or the out, which is going to be all of the false values. And the reason why I use this method here is so that way all of the elements or the views that I want to work with are going to be coming out of my in output. If we were to utilize this method, all of the views that we want to work with would be coming out of our output there. So the list that we want to iterate over, again, it's not these elements here. These are the scope boxes in our project. We do not want to iterate over that. We're simply using the value or the data that's stored within those views to deliver us the true false value in order to obtain the views that we do want to work with. So I'll just take the output of this view here. Let me drag this up. And if we look at this list, we can see all of the views that we want to work with, all of the area plans listed here. All right, so let's go ahead and move this over a bit. So now we have all of the views that we want to work with coming out of our in value. Also, if you look at the list structure in here, you can see what all of the values are in the in output. If I collapse that, I can see all of the values coming from our output. So the next thing I want to do here is I'm just going to simply flatten the in list. No need to keep the list structure here, make things more difficult moving along the way in Dynamo using list lacing, that sort of thing. So we'll just flatten that list. Drag this out a little bit further. And so now what we have here are all of the lists, all of the views that we wish to create a title block off of. So kind of brings us back to this workflow here. Drag this over. Brings us back to this portion here. Since we have all the views we want to work with, we can actually use that information in order to replicate the amount of items in here. And the way we do that is we're just going to use a simple list.count node. So we're going to count all of the elements or the items in our list. So list.count. So I'll drop this here. I'll tie the count into the amount because it's looking for a number specifically, or in this case, an integer. And the list count is going to give us an integer. This is mad at us because we haven't fulfilled the amount yet, although we have inputted into there. So once we tie this list into here, it's going to be happy again. So again, it's going to count all 32 of those elements in there. We can see here list.count 32. and it's going to create 32 or replicate this family type 32 times for us to utilize into our sheet crate. I'm not going to tie this into here just yet. I'm going to do a little bit more work prior to that because we want to start building our sheet number. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start building our sheet number, and we're actually going to use a dictionary to help us with that. So we're going to start building our keys for this dictionary. So that way when it finds a specific item or a specific thing, it's going to give us a specific result. Specifically what I'm going to use is the name of the actual view itself and the associated level that it's on. Or actually I'm going to use the view type and the associated level in order to drive that key. So anytime it sees the view type 01 entry level, specifically when it finds just kind of like the floor plan here, it's going to give me the actual correct sheet number that's associated to it. So let's go ahead and get started with that. We're going to use another element.getParameter by name. Get parameter value by name. And we're going to work off of these elements here. The parameter name we're looking for is type. So what this is going to do is it's going to give us the type of view it is, so view family type, and what we're going to do is just extract the name out of that. So we'll grab the element name. We can see here it's going to give us floor plan, furniture plan, and ceiling plan. So kind of working off of this, if you know your floor plans, you want to make sure that those are probably the A100 series. Furniture plans, I'm just giving it the AE 800 series, and then the ceiling plans will be the 121 series. So now how do we know how to associate these correctly? How do we know what level these are associated on? So that way all of my level 1 views get the 100, the 101, level 2 gets 102, so on and so forth. How do I know how to do that? What I'm going to do then is use another get parameter value by index, or get parameter value by name, and we're going to grab the associated level. The associated level, let me tie that into there. And basically, all views have an associated level for them. So if you scroll down in the properties, let's see, where is it? Associated level under extents. So I'm just pulling that information out of the views themselves. Now you can use other pieces of information to create your dictionary. It doesn't have to be the method I'm using here. If you're using view templates and you have a view template specifically for each level for whatever reason, you can utilize that. Just try and find some form or some sort of pattern that will differentiate, you know, all of the elements that you want specifically. I want to differentiate all of my entry-level floor plans, all of my floor plans on level 2, floor plans on level 3, and my roof plans. So kind of just try to figure out some form or method to create this dictionary. Now, probably could have used just the element name and just remove the area out of it. That would have also been a very, very well thought out method to creating a dictionary. So I'm just using this method here to kind of show you how we can take information, join them together, and then utilize that as a dictionary. So what we're going to do here is we're going to now combine these two lists of data together. I'm going to simply use a code block for that, and I'm just going to create a variable for those. So I'll call it view type plus space dash space in the form of a string plus the view level. So notice these are showing up as black as they are listed as variables. So my view type, when you're creating variables too, try to make them something that kind of makes sense to you, that others will understand. I know sometimes when I'm creating variables real quickly, I'll just use the letter X, the letter Y. Utilizing this method here kind of makes it a little bit easier when you come back to this workflow, you know, 3 years later, and you're like, what in the world was this variable standing for? If you use something like this, you'll be able to understand, okay, That's the view type. That's the views level. So we'll just tie the string into here, and we'll tie this into here. And if you look at our list of elements, we can see that we have our names there. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I just want to grab each unique item out of this. So I don't want to grab all of these and plug it into my keys. I want to just plug in one and tie it into my key. This floor plan 02, I don't want the rest of these. I just want the floor plan 03, so on and so forth. So how we do that is we're going to use a node called list.uniqueItems. List.uniqueItems, we'll tie that into there. So we have a unique set of items. We'll then now tie this into our keys as when we, I'll just move this up here, we'll minimize that. So now that we have our dictionary created, a dictionary is a unsorted list of a collection of elements that will give you the actual value that you're looking for depending on the key that you specify. So we can analyze and look at our dictionary here, make sure that everything kind of lines up with one another. And once we have that, we can then tie this into our key, and then we can see the output that's going to give me. It's going to give me all of the sheet numbers that I'm looking for each value there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to now grab the area that's associated to, so A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. So we're going to kind of backtrack a little bit in our workflow. I'm going to actually minimize that. Again, there's multiple ways to extract this information. Again, if you feel like you can extract it a little bit easier, go ahead and do that method. You don't necessarily have to follow my means and methods. I'm just going to show you kind of different ways to extract this information. So we're going to extract the scope box, get the name, split it, and then grab the area that's associated to it. So I'll just copy and paste this, minimize that, and create a code block. We'll call this scope box. Tie this into here, and we have our list of elements, the scope boxes that are associated to those views. We're going to use an element name, so I'm just going to copy and paste this. So Control C, Control V, place this here, and then just connect that node into there. And so there we have our names of our scope boxes, and what I want is just the character at the end. I notice that there is a space in between all of these, which is consistent across the board. So what I'm going to use is a node called string.split. What this is going to do is it's going to split the given string at a separator that we specify. That separator is going to be the space. So I'll just tie string into string, my separator, create another code block, and I'll just simply do quotation, space, quotation to illustrate a space. You're not going to see anything listed here, but when we tie this into our separator and we drop down, we can see that it's indented, or it's actually broken the strings into two different strings, splitting it at that actual separator here. So kind of that's what this node does here. And what I want to do from here now is I just want to grab all of the items at index 1 that are nested inside of here. So how we do that is we use a list.getItemAtIndex. So there's 2 in here. We want the actual item at index, and you can see there as the input, it's looking for an integer. That's what we're looking for. We're going to be supplying it a number. So I'll place this list.getItemAtIndex. I'll tie my string into my list, and the index I want to get, again, is number 1. So again, I can create a code block. Type in the number 1. If it shows up blue, it's a number itself. Tie this into index, look at what we get, and it's not giving me exactly what I want. What it's doing is it's grabbing just this item at index 1 within the main compose list. I want it to nest inside and look a little bit deeper into this list here and grab everything at index 1. So how we do that is we just change the list at level here, and it automatically is going to default to at level 2. So it's going to be at level 2 here, which is going to nest and grab these elements in here. As you can see, as I change it to level 2, it grabs A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. So now that I have those set, what I'm going to do is combine these 2 together to create my sheet number. So I'm going to create another code block here. give it variables again. So my sheet number plus my view area. So notice I don't include a space here because I don't want it to include a space. Again, you can use a string insert in this case, though this just kind of makes it a little bit less nodes in a sense. So my sheet number, which are these values here, and my sheet area. If I look at this list, I can see 101A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. So the next thing that I'm going to do here is start to create my sheet names. We'll use another code block here, and we already actually have those view names specified back here. Or actually, where are they? So actually, floor plan, they'll be listed here. We can also utilize this list here. I'm actually going to utilize this information here to start to create my my sheet name. So create variables again. So the view name plus, I want to include the space dash space in this instance, plus my area, which is coming from this portion here. So I'll place that there. And notice too that these are all lowercase. Let's make them uppercase. So how we do that is we use a node called string.upper, string.toUpper, sorry, string2upper. We'll tie this into here, and it's going to capitalize everything in there. Though if you are more familiar with Dynamo and you're more familiar with DesignScript, you're more than welcome to incorporate that into here. So I'm going to tie my strings that are uppercased into my view name and my areas, which come back here, into this view area here. And we can see the names of our sheets are listed here. We can actually double click into the code block to change the name. So I can call this sheet number. I like to include what it originally came from, which is a code block. And then sheet name. All right, so we have our sheet name, our sheet numbers created. Now what we're ready to do is start creating sheets, but we're not yet ready to place views onto sheets just yet. So at this point, I am going to change this from automatic to manual because I'm about to start creating a bunch of stuff, specifically 32 sheets. I do not want to run into any infinite loop at this point. I want to make sure that I'm in a manual mode here. So I'll tie my list into my title blocks. And before I hit run, I know what I'm going to do already. This is going to give me a list of sheets. And as it's creating those sheets, what I want it to do is actually set the parameters for the sheet name and then the sheet number. So I'm going to use two nodes here. So the first node is obviously an element.set parameter because we're setting parameters for a specific element. And my method for setting multiple parameters at the same time is I like to use a list.combine node. List combine, and my combiner is going to be my element.set parameter by name. What it's going to do is iterate through the first set of values that I input in the first index, and then it'll run through and set the second items there. So I'll tie my sheets into my element. No need to input any information here. We just need it to specify the element, as this is going to be, again, our combiner. And kind of at this point, what it does is list 1 is going to be our parameter name, and list 2 is going to be our value. So it's, to start building out our parameter name, we'll use a code block. We'll create a list, so we'll use square brackets. You zoom in here. We'll use square brackets, start the quote. And I'm looking to set the sheet number, comma, next parameter, sheet name, and quote, close the bracket, and we have a list of parameters there. So I'll just tie that into my list here. Now what I want to do is combine these two values into a list. I'll use a list create node. Expand that. As you can see in this node, we're allowed to expand amount of items that we wish to combine as a list. So I'll just take this and tie that into that input and this into that input. Do keep in mind how you're inputting these into your list create, as it's going to match up to your parameters that you specified. So if I had these flip-flopped for whatever reason, if I had sheet number and number 1, and sheet name and 0, it's actually going to take the sheet name and apply it to the sheet number, and it's going to take the sheet number and apply it to the actual sheet name itself. Not exactly what we want. So before you do this method, make sure that these are listed in the right order. So 0 in this case is going to be sheet number, 0 in this case is sheet number, and then sheet name, and then our sheet names from here. So I'll tie that into our list. So we have all of that specified. We'll go ahead and drag Dynamo off to the side. We're going to collapse the views. We're going to have sheets open. We're going to hit F5, cross our fingers, and look, it did run it, it created it. We can see here the sheet number, AE101A, followed by the sheet name that we had specified and the area. So this is fine and dandy. We just need to now start placing views onto sheets. So this is another workflow where you're gonna want to undo quite a bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo all of that information there. I'm actually going to disconnect the input from the sheet create node to kind of clear those values. So it's left as function, right? There's nothing going into it, it's kind of cleared. And so what we want to do now is we want to start placing views onto sheets. So what I'm going to do here is I've been testing this out and I've been starting to like it more and more, is I'm going to actually use a transaction end node. So look for end, transaction.end. All right, so transaction.end node. What this is going to do is whenever we have this inputted into our graph, it's going to return what we input into it. However, what it's going to do is just give us an additional undo portion for our Dynamo workflow. So if rather you don't want it to undo the entire workflow and rather you want to have undos in parts for your workflow, transaction end works wonderful in those situations. So I'm going to include a transaction end here, and the node we're going to use to place views onto sheets is called viewport.create out of the rhythm package. Viewport.create, we'll place this here and look at what it's giving us. It's looking for a sheet, a view, and then a specified location. All right, so we already have our sheets. One thing I'm going to do also from here, so we have our sheets back here, and what I'm going to do is use a pass-through node from the Clockwork package. Let me just drag these over. So I'm going to use a pass-through from Clockwork. And what this node is going to do is it's going to wait for a process to be completed before it passes through whatever we specify through the pass-through. So our pass-through is going to be our sheets. What is it going to wait for? It's going to wait for this transaction end. So once this transaction has ended, it's then going to pass through our sheets to then run through the view.create or viewport.create node there. So I'll tie my pass through into my sheet because it's going to return what we enter in through the pass through here. And so we need to go and grab our views. And so if we go way back into our workflow here, we have all of our views listed here. Remember, we used all of that information to start building off of and start creating our sheet name, sheet number. And so these are the views that we're going to use to set and place onto our sheets. So I'll just take this output here and tie it into my view. Now we can specify a location. All it's looking for is a specific point. How we do this is we just look for the node point by coordinates. Point by coordinates, there's an X and a Y, and there's one for X, Y, and Z. We don't need to specify a Z value here really, so we can just use the X and Y value. So I'll use the point by coordinates. I've already done the calculation to kind of find where the midpoint is going to be on my title block. So one value is going to be for the X, it's 1.570. And then the next one is 1.408 as my Y value. notice as I had those all in one line followed by a semicolon, it will actually indent those into two different objects for you. So I'll take this, tie this point into my location. Now, the one thing that I was running through yesterday in terms of testing is make sure your units are correct, because I was specifying the actual placement point of my views and it didn't look like they were moving anywhere. That's because my units were wrong. So let me go into Manage, Project Units, everything set to millimeters. Autodesk, please give us a fractional feet and inches template or sample files, please. So I'll set that to fractional feet and inches, and I'll do area just to be on the safe side to square feet. Hit OK. Hit OK here. And let's see. So again, we don't have any sheets created. We still have our views created here. And we have the portion of the workflow that's going to go through and create the sheet, set the sheet parameter, the sheet number, the sheet name, wait for that transaction to end, and then place our views onto our sheets. So let's go ahead and run this again, cross our fingers. We can see there that it stopped still running because it ended that transaction. It's going through again, and then it's going to start to place views onto sheets. Let's give it a couple seconds here. And so it has finished. So let's go ahead and minimize this. Let's go and investigate to see if it did actually run. And so as I expand this, it's AE 101A floor plan, and the floor plan entry level area A is on that sheet. Let's open it up and see if it placed it. Yep, it placed it right in the center. Now, it is going to place it about the center of the entire crop region here. So if you have stuff like this annoying internal origin showing in your project, it is going to encounter that and take it into consideration. Also, if you have any of the sections that cut through the entire project, it is going to also take that into consideration, defining the actual crop region here. Now, there's a really awesome add-in from the Parallax team called the Super Duper Internal Origin Hidifier. It is free. Go ahead and install it. Let me go ahead and drag this on here. And so it told me we have successfully hid the internal origin in 150 views. It does it in view templates as well. It includes a cute picture of a puppy. How could you not love this? Go ahead and install this. It is completely free to hide that annoying internal origin in your project. So go ahead and close. Again, we have the section that we're needing to deal with. So go ahead and go through any of the testing that you may need to want to go through in order to hide that, rerun it, whatever you need to do. We can see here my title block, the template, out of the box title block doesn't incorporate the entire name of here, but it does name it per what we told it how to name it. So that's the workflow in a sense, kind of a pretty intense workflow here. Again, don't worry, you're going to have the workflow to play around with and reverse engineer, make your own, and test out on your own. Again, I do recommend doing this in a test file. Don't do this in your actual project file. Always test it, make sure it works first before you start running it on other projects. All right, and so it looks like we have just 2 minutes left of time going through those two workflows. Be on the lookout. I am going to do a couple more Dynamo webinars. My AU classes, unfortunately, didn't get accepted, so be on the lookout for a couple additional webinars that I was going to do at AU, but I'm just going to do them as webinars. One is going to be for specifically for project setup, and then the other one is going to be a part 2 for UI and Dynamo. So let's get to some of these questions. The Dynamo file that is displayed on your screen, is it out of the box from the Archilab package? So most of the nodes in there, I built it all on my own out of the box, and then I just utilized the Archilab package to create those. I hope that answers that question. Could you demonstrate how to open the file again? So when you download the files onto your desktop, I'm going to go ahead and close that. You'll go ahead and open navigate to the actual file that you want to, that you saved your Dynamo workflows to. You'll just click on open. Make sure this says open in manual execution mode. I think I did everything I could to make sure it will open in manual execution mode, but make sure before you run or open any of these workflows or anyone else's workflows for that matter, to always do it in manual execution mode, because there could be a potential risk of running into an infinite loop. You do not want to run into an infinite loop. You'll have a bad day after doing that. So just click on the graph. You'll want to be in Dynamo. Click on the graph, make sure it's open in execution mode, click open, and then it'll open the workflow for you, and then you can start going and clicking run, start seeing what it is doing. Is there a dictionary of nodes that would describe the function of each node or what each node does? So there's a website, I believe it's called dynamonodes.com. I believe it's run by Luke Johnson. I can't remember if that's his last name or not, but run by a really nice person. And in there should be some of the packages and the nodes that come along with those packages that have a description on there. I'm not sure how often it's updated, but that would be a good source for that. Also combing through and following all of these content creators on LinkedIn and Twitter, as they'll post here and there when they're updating their packages, the stuff that they have in their packages. Also searching through the Dynamo forum, searching on Google. Trying to find out what the specific nodes does. So like if you were to go and search for views.getByType Dynamo, you would probably come up with some stuff on the Dynamo forum, including how to kind of utilize this node, as people ask, like, how do you use this node? Why isn't it working? And so utilizing the Dynamo forum for that. What resources am I using to study Python and C#? I'm actually using Udemy. I'm going through a 0 to Hero bootcamp class on Udemy, and it has no background tie-ins to Dynamo itself, as it's just teaching you about Python, the language of Python, how to understand it, and from that I'm actually able to understand it a little bit easier, kind of going through that bootcamp method. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I made a post, I think 2 weeks ago, describing like a breakthrough that I had personally with using Python in a Dynamo workflow. In there, I include the Udemy course that I'm actually taking to learn Python. Have you tried to create a GitHub for Dynamo scripts? I am looking into GitHub. I'm still kind of trying to understand GitHub, but eventually I would like to host them onto GitHub for people to kind of go and download. All right, have a good one, everyone.